Welcome to the Courage to Be podcast with Tanya Vasallo. Before we get into this episode, I want to share with you that I'm on a mission to close the gender gap in the podcasting world so that more and more women's voices are heard. If you feel that this is something you value too, then please rate, review, and share the podcast. And in exchange, and as my way to say thank you to you, I want to give you free access to my signature course called Manifesting Abundance, which typically sells for $997. All you have to do to gain access is leave me a review on Apple Podcasts, take a snapshot of it, and send it to help.thecouragetobe@gmail.com, and we'll get you set up with access to the course. Welcome back to the Courage to Be, where we have powerful conversations to transform your life and your business. And today we have Christiane Panesar with us. Welcome, Christiane.
Thanks so much for having me, Tanya.
So tell us, Christiane, a little bit of your background and the type of work that you do and what is it that you do and that you're putting out there into the world, please.
Yeah. So I help women embody, unleash their deep feminine power and express their authentic voice and really bring out what they really are. And for that, I founded Dragoness Rising, the School of Deeper Womanness, as a sanctuary for women awakening to their magical essence and unapologetically stepping into the highest calling as mothers, as lovers, and as leaders. And I used to be a holistic nutrition consultant for about 10 years and never really dared to go further into the depth and what I was really interested in and what I really wanted to coach women about. And that has been like a whole journey for me to even dare to speak about these more unusual topics, which I think are really, really important for women.
Like what topics? Let's go. I love taboo topics, and that you're sharing that it was hard for you or like almost daring to go into this world. So let's dive deeper. Let's go deeper with you.
Yeah, and I can talk for a long time, so like just like stop me and ask questions and jump right in there. So for example, as a nutritional consultant, I always thought I had to prove everything scientifically with, oh, this study and oxidative stress and for the purpose of this, and here's the recipe and hands-on, and here's the diet plan. What I actually wanted to always tell people was like, okay, like, you know what to do, why are you not doing it, right? Like what's underneath, like why are you sad? Like, it's not about the nutrients and all of that so much. It's just like one level, but to really going deep into, for example, topics of depression, which I find fascinating. And I've been dealing with that on and off, like since I was a little child. And where we're coping, where we're trying so good, where we're holding it all together and try to make the healthy smoothie and do the exercises, and still people aren't happy or aren't getting the results they're needing. So there's something underneath the addictions we have, like where we're trying to cover the pain, where we're trying to be these good girls. So now I'm talking more about these topics of good girl conditioning. What are we actually? How are we connected to our power and all that magic?
So this is fascinating. Let's go deeper into this part of good girl conditioning.
So good girl conditioning. So I was raised in a small town in Germany as a good girl, and meaning like, don't step on anyone's toes, always behave, always smile, don't talk too much, don't make anyone feel uncomfortable, be the best at everything, but also don't outshine anyone. So that kind of a thing. And when my parents divorced when I was about 6 or 7, my whole world really fell apart. And I tried even harder to be a good girl because somehow I thought this was all my fault, as children often put the fault towards themselves. And when I was about 13, I went through another significant trauma, as so many women, and I was molested by a family member. And the worst part about that was really my mother's reaction, who I went to right away, which was like, not like, oh my God, like, are you okay? And let me talk to him. This doesn't happen anymore. What she said was, well, why do you always go to him? And right away, I thought, okay, well, I guess I did something wrong. I didn't talk about it anymore because it wasn't really welcomed. And I didn't want to cause him any trouble. So I was this really good girl. Like, what if this comes out? And what about this relationship? What about his job? But it really messed me up, the whole thing of like, what, it was my fault. Like, I guess I'm too, I don't know, tempting, or like, I didn't quite get it, but it really, really confused it. And I was really confused in who I was, in that it was right to speak. I was confused in what sexuality meant. And I just went on pretending that nothing happened because he pretended nothing happened. And it happened again. And I still managed to have a superficially good relationship with him, and we just didn't talk about it. And I tried to forgive, but it kept on coming back up to me in dreams. I did a lot of trauma work, a lot of inner work, and I worked through a lot of it, but I didn't really realize how much it actually had affected me and how much I mistrusted myself. And as a good girl, I was just trying to hide my pain and my shame and my insecurities under my big, big smiles. And as a teenager, I really was longing for meaning in life. Like, I was raised religiously, but I couldn't quite connect to it because I was like, well, how do I know the truth of this? How can I believe something that I don't really know the truth of? And I went to study philosophy and literature and theater at the university in Munich and in Italy. And I didn't find the answers to what's the meaning of life and who am I. But I found my husband, now my husband, in the theater class at that time. And again, we almost like missed each other. I didn't think this was, I thought it was too good to be true. I already said goodbye to him because I thought I'd rather say bye to him before he breaks up with me. But here we are, and I took my courage and I went to visit him, and I stayed in Alberta, Canada. So I was still just totally messed up from this good girl conditioning and having to have all the best grades in university and wanted to be a philosophy professor. But after I went to Canada and I just paused for a moment and I realized how I was actually feeling in my body and in my nervous system, I just stopped it all. And it just had no meaning to me anymore. But I kept on searching. I was like, okay, like there was just this pain in me, and I just had to figure out. Like, I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but I just had to find it. And I went on ayahuasca journeys. I studied with different teachers. I studied with Dr. Gabor Mate. I did the practitioner training and those kinds of things. And it was actually in an ayahuasca session where I could see that what happened was that I actually never really let in that pain. And I couldn't quite go under, and I had to have more and more of the medicine. And I could see that the entrance to going deeper was actually through the pain. And there was this piercing through my heart, just letting in all the pain with my husband, and then kind of going through different topics in my life. And I could see that everything I was so afraid of, it was actually okay. Like, I was really okay with it. And I kind of went into it with the intention of facing my deepest fears. And that's what I got. But then there was like, okay, now I'm done with the suffering. Like, I'm done with the spinning. I'm done with this beating myself up. And I made the decision in the ayahuasca session that I don't have to suffer anymore. I could just see that I'm doing this to myself, like that I'm holding on to all these things. And then it went away. It passed just by staying with that knowing. And that shaman, really sweet old lady, came to me the next morning, and she said she came and she witnessed what I was going through. And she said there was a dark energy on my heart holding me down. And she said the moment I let go of it, it let go of me. And I could see, okay, we're the power holder. Like, nobody's doing anything to us. We're no victim. And it really helped me in my journey. And of course, this was an experience and it stayed for a few weeks, but then you still have to do the work. It's a process, and we keep on falling down and getting back up. But coming back to the good girl thing, what really helped me to get through this was when I became a mother, because motherhood started with a life-threatening situation at birth. The placenta came off and I started bleeding heavily. And there went this amazing home birth, water birth dream. And I ended up in the hospital, and the doctors wanted to induce me. And we're like really fear-mongering and almost like threatening. And you have to leave the room if I don't like get out of the room now and do the induction, and they take me off the monitor. So it was a really, really good lesson to put my foot down in terms of, well, I don't know about this. Like, I'm not in any pain right now. Like, I'm open to getting help, but also I don't know about this, like getting the baby out right now. And like, why is my body not starting? Why is the baby not coming? And I started asking questions, and I kicked everyone out of the room. And I said, no, I will make a decision, but it needs to come from me. And I could see that at the core of where things were stuck and not moving was that, again, I thought there was something wrong with my body. Like, okay, I'm bleeding. It looks like it's starting, but it's not really starting. Like, okay, there must be something I'm doing wrong. And there was this knowing all of a sudden that, okay, I don't feel worthy to actually have this baby. And I had to let that really sink in. And I cried and I cried and I cried. And once I moved through it and I made the decision of going to the bathroom and making love with my husband in the midst of it, because I knew that this was something that could help. The doctor said, yeah, well, like when I asked her about it before, she said, yeah, well, it could help, but you can't do that here. But I thought, okay, well, I have to try this out, if it's that simple. And I tell you what, it worked. Like 45 minutes later, after we were finally calm, just the two of us lying in bed and just trusting my body, trusting the baby, water broke like that. Like the contractions started every 4 minutes, totally regularly. And 8 hours later, we had a total natural birth, a total healthy baby. And this experience, I'm telling all of this, it just really helped me to get over this good girl conditioning because it was all of a sudden about something bigger than myself. Like for myself, maybe I wouldn't have opened the mouth and tolerated that people think I'm crazy and risk, like they thought I'm crazy. I'm just risking my life, risking my baby's life. And they've done it so many times. What would I know? It's my first time. And then after this, I finally had the courage to talk to the involved people of that named trauma when I was a young teenager. And I wrote that person a letter. And that was about 6 years ago when my daughter was born. And he didn't answer anything. And I said in the letter, it's okay. I just needed to speak. And I'm not blaming anything. It's all good. I just have to talk about it. I just can't pretend it didn't happen and I didn't notice. And I spoke to my mother as well. And we had just the best conversation ever. Just it went so unexpectedly well. But it was so uncomfortable, right? It's so uncomfortable to talk about this. And people just thinking or maybe people thinking I'm just this victim. I just want to make myself important. So it was really, really hard. But when I became a mother, it became clear that I had to speak up for my daughter, that I'm not passing on this good girl patterning to her. And just recently, actually just last month, because he didn't answer, I actually left a voice message and I was like, okay, it's actually not good enough for me that you're not answering. I need to hear from you. Like, what are you thinking about this? Like, just a statement. Like, are you just ignoring it or like what's going on? Like, you don't care? I actually need to hear something from you. And he answered. And it turned out that he couldn't even really remember, but he took on full responsibility for, he's like, well, if that's how you feel, and if I did something, and I don't know, was I drunk? And it was just totally disappeared out of him. And we actually closed this, like I already found my peace with, okay, I never need to hear anything about this from him. But it actually resolved. And that's why I encourage women like to keep on speaking, even if they feel like they're crazy and even if it's uncomfortable for this conditioning. And I'm going to take a little break because I know I just talked for a long time.
No, this is fascinating. There's so many questions I have with each part of this. So let's unpack it a little bit more. So this good girl conditioning starts at that young age of being molested and speaking up, and not being accepted with what you're speaking. So now you're starting to suppress, right? Did you speak with anyone else besides your mom? Obviously, you got that bad reaction, and I don't know, did you share your story with anyone else throughout the years before you talked to your mom again or with the family
Yeah,
member?
only with my best friend at that time who I know since I can think, but with no one else till I shared it with my husband where we were together. And then later I started speaking about it like just a few months ago, actually, and a couple of podcasts and like made it part of my work because I just had to. It just became so clear. Like one part of me was like, well, why am I making such a big fuss about it? Like other women endure way worse, and it's so much time has passed. But I knew I had to speak it, and I'm glad I did. Otherwise, I would have just been with, okay, just forgive each other, and it's okay. You don't even have to mention it. But this is just so much more powerful, and the relationship with him is just like really real. Like I feel I have this person back in my life, and but what was important, I think, was to speak from vulnerability. And I was really vulnerable. And I just said, I just want you back in my life. And the worst part for me was just that now I couldn't love you anymore because then it's kind of my fault because I love you and maybe I shouldn't. And I just have to be superficial. And so, yeah, it could have been okay to not talk about it. And maybe it's not true for everyone and in any situation. But for me and my extreme patterning of like, oh, don't ruffle any feathers, don't make anyone feel uncomfortable, right? Don't make yourself important. Like it was really important to push through that. And I can tell that for my daughters and how they're developing, that is actually like the biggest gift I could give them. And the ayahuasca session was also like, it was part of like the intention was really before I would become a mother to clear out as much as I can of what I'm dealing with and what I can take care of in my life. So it doesn't all go to her.
We're going to take a quick pause and come back to this because there's a lot more that I want to unpack here, Christiane. Hi there, I have something really cool for you. I want to give you free access to my signature course called Manifesting Abundance, which typically sells for $997. You can check out all the details in the show notes. All you have to do to gain access is leave me a review on Apple Podcast, take a snapshot of it, and send it to help.thecouragetobe@gmail.com, and we'll get you set up with access to the course. You can also find other free goodies in the show notes. Go check them out. Let's go with, good for you for digging deeper instead of covering, and then one day it'll explode or it gets passed down to, your daughters, like you're saying. You decided to have the courage and go into uncomfortable territories because that cannot be easy to confront and have a conversation with a family member. Do you feel that if it wouldn't have been a family member, if it was someone else, that you would have still had that conversation years later just for your own purposes? Or no, because you're, like you just did it with the family member because you wanted some closure, you wanted some understanding, you wanted to voice, like what would have been different if it was someone else that would have molested you?
Probably would have made a difference a little bit. Like if I would have been in contact with the person, I think I would have still tried to resolve it if I would still have them accessible. Yeah, but since it is there's love involved, right? And all of a sudden, as a child, it was like, oh, now I have to cut the love because like this happened, and I don't even know how and why. But that definitely made it more significant. But I think in either case, I think it's really good to still voice it and go through that discomfort and speak up for yourself. And I forgot what I was just want to say, but it'll come back.
We'll come back to it, or if it comes back to you, just please share. So I want to go down the path of having the experience of ayahuasca. Was that what Dr. Gabor Mate? It's funny that you're mentioning this because just recently, I've listened to a couple, I've followed him for many years, but just recently heard him on Joe Rogan's podcast with doing psychedelics and doing ayahuasca. It's just, I'm putting two and two together because he talks about doing ayahuasca and he got kicked out because the energy was so dark for him. So I'd like to go deeper into your journey with ayahuasca and how intuitive on your part to say, you know what, I need to do this before I become a mom. And so I can clear things, like just intuitively, you knew that there was some clearing that had to be done there. And I'd love to hear more about it because I interviewed JJ Myers. It's episode 101 because she's been on the podcast twice. And she's a 70-something-year-old woman, 74, I think it is, had never done drugs, had never done anything, but she experienced having a mushroom journey and how incredible it was for her, her spiritual awakening through mushrooms, through plant medicine. And I have done mushrooms and I've had that experience, but I've never experienced ayahuasca. And I'd be curious to hear a little bit of that journey and what resonated with me, what you were saying with that darkness that had gripped your heart and how it let go and what the shaman said. Can you take us down that path and what that was all about, Christiane?
Yeah, I love talking about that. It's nice to have a place to talk about that. Yeah, I think for me, it was always this longing, and it kind of has to do with what I just wanted to say when I forgot, this longing to be authentic. And I realized, okay, I'm not really authentic with people, but I couldn't quite figure out how to not do it. Because I just tried to be so good and not be weird, not freak people out, not like I always thought I'd be too much for people if I talk about the things I'm really interested in. If I like sometimes I don't feel like talking and I'm going through something. Sometimes I feel like talking a lot. So like to actually just allow myself to be me, and I felt like I had to clear something out of there. And I really went in with that intention of, okay, I want to get to that. And to say that right away, like ayahuasca can be very different for everyone who does it. And I think it really matters how you go into it. And I know just another one advice I got when I got in was to not resist it. And that's really the thing of not resisting, like whatever comes. And also a good friend of mine, for him, it was also too much. He couldn't, and he was resisting it. He couldn't do it. He never did it again. And he was actually supposed to help guide the session. It was in another session.
Did
So
you go somewhere to do it? Like, did you travel, with local shamans and stuff? Or was this somewhere in Germany? Like, where did
it was
you do your...
locally in Canada.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And although that would be amazing to do it somewhere in the jungle.
Yeah.
And I did it
Yeah.
twice here locally. And for my husband, he was next to me, and his journey was like very, very different. And I think it really, like, what you need, what you ask for, that's what you get. And it was interesting for me because when I asked to encounter my like deepest fears, like my deepest fear was actually, and I even countered this topic of rape, although I didn't get raped, but just this intrusion of space, someone intruding your space. And I felt that kind of in every cell of my body, that like I had no barrier, no protection. Everything was coming in into every cell of my body. So it was really quite scary. But I remembered this, okay, don't resist it, don't resist it. And then what was interesting, my biggest fear actually wasn't even anything like that anything was done to me. My biggest fear, like all of a sudden things turned, and all of a sudden I turned from the victim to the perpetrator, to the rapist, like in that energy journey I went through. And I was like, oh, I could be that too, right? Like we're like kind of everything. And then I could see my biggest fear was actually that I would be bad, like that I was a bad person, that I was a bad girl. And I sensed that since I was a little girl, always like some dark energy around me, like trying to suck me in and make me believe, oh, this is me. So I give my power away. And I came in the ayahuasca journey again, like just my fear of that I would be bad. And that's why I was trying to be so good all my life to make up for this flaw. So that came up. So that was so interesting. But then also this, well, actually, okay, I'm not this, like how you're being taught in religion, like you're the sinner. You have to, what's the word? You have to repent, like you have to make up for being bad, and atone is the word. And it was like, no, actually, I'm done with this. I don't need to suffer, and I don't have to suffer if I don't do that to myself. And then everything changed. Like, and I think in ayahuasca, it's really what you want it to be. Like, it's what you need. And then I did it a second time, and I kind of thought, oh, now it's different. Now I'm done with the darkness. I can have a light, like a lovely journey full of light. But it was, again, it was kind of, I didn't go deep, I didn't go under. I was kind of resisting it till I actually went, like it was like going under the earth, and it was like being swallowed almost by roots. And but then this journey, it was kind of similar experience, again, the struggling and suffering. And then someone else, actually someone I knew, I heard her crying in the bathroom, and the facilitator was somebody else, tried to calm her down, and she just wouldn't calm down. She was like so desperate, and nobody could go to sleep because she was just like so in her thing, and everyone tried to help her. And then I was still like also spinning and struggling. But then my husband said to me, and actually, you're not supposed to talk, you're not supposed to touch anyone. So I was like kind of just in my private little bubble. And he's like, all of a sudden talked to me. He's like, yeah, I think you can help her. And I was just like, what? I'm like struggling myself. And like, what? Like I was kind of, how can I help her? And I went into the bathroom, and somehow I knew exactly how to be with her. I knew exactly what to say because I knew what she went through, because I could see this as a strength. Like all this pain I went through was like, okay, now I can help others with that. So that was kind of my second ayahuasca journey, having that experience. And it was so lovely and so intimate with the person. And I usually might be afraid to touch someone going through something, but I knew how to touch her, I knew how to see and how to hold her. So that was that ayahuasca journey. And that was so wonderful and so beautiful as well.
And both of these were before your daughters were born, before you became a mom?
Yeah, I didn't do
And
that.
so you knew that you wanted to go through these to release some things before becoming a mom? Is that why you chose to journey at that particular moment in time?
Yeah, I mean, for myself as well, but I knew I want to get pregnant, but I first want to do that. So, and I
So
didn't,
that you could. You
And
could release certain things. Okay, so let's move to the part of giving birth and advocating for yourself. It's just such a reminder. There's also another episode, I think it's like around 105, 106, Gina Meyer Vincent, and she talks in that particular episode, if you're listening to this and you're curious about it, how she advocated for her husband's health because of doctors. I feel like sometimes we put these doctors because they're wearing the white coat like up on a pedestal instead of listening to our own intuition and what our body's asking for. And we just assume that these doctors have the answer. So it really struck a chord with me as you were saying, that you were giving birth and that you were having some trouble. Can you walk us through everything that happened there and how you mustered that strength to just advocate for yourself and stand up for yourself and listen to your inner knowing, of just like our inner knowing?
yeah, first it was like when I started bleeding that night, and it reminded me of going through that miscarriage that I had. I didn't have it, but I had a miscarriage before. So it reminded me of that. But then I went to see the midwife the next morning, and she right away sent me to the hospital to do an ultrasound. And at first I was like, oh, almost relieved, like, okay, they're gonna take care of me. It's fine. Doesn't matter how the baby comes. Like, it's all different than I thought. And my doula wasn't there because baby was 2 weeks early almost. My best friend, who's this amazing intuitive healer, was there, like kind of I felt just like alone. My midwife signed me over to the doctor because like, okay, this is beyond my scope of practice, which makes
Were,
sense.
were you going to give birth at home and then you got sent to the hospital, or was the plan to give birth at the hospital?
Plan was to give birth at home. I had the
At
pool
home
set
and
up.
then you got sent.
But just the
Okay.
day before, I packed the hospital bag already just in case. So it was interesting timing. And everyone told me, no, the baby will come later. It's your first baby. Don't worry. And even my husband said, oh, don't do that to me. Because I said, well, it feels like it could come early. He said, don't do that to me because I don't have time off at that time. And then I didn't even call a midwife at night because I was like, oh, I don't want to disturb her. So I was like still going through this, trying to be really good and do it all comfortable for everyone. And it was the midwife. I went to see her, and then she wanted to do an ultrasound because she also couldn't understand what was going on. And everything was just going just so well before that. So I didn't fall. So everyone was shocked when that diagnosis came. And I was just like, okay, it's okay. I'm glad I'm in these hands. And the whole night I couldn't sleep. I was put on this monitor so they could hear baby's heart rate, so that in case the heart rate increases, we could like intervene and get the baby out fast if needed. And my husband left and he grabbed all our things, and I was just feeling really alone that night and hardly slept. But then that night I was like, okay, well, is that really now the answer, to just induce now and get the baby out? And I started asking questions. Well, why doesn't the baby come if it's supposed to come? Like, why is my body doing it if things are starting, but I'm apparently not in active labor? And then my mother-in-law came and was like offended. I didn't tell her I was in the hospital. She heard from somebody else. There were like all these pressures and all these people in the room. And I called, actually, like this little part of the story I skipped because I didn't want to make it too long. I called this medium, which we actually had an appointment with that day because we wanted to ask for my husband's job future. So we're like, so we're in the hospital and would you mind actually coming here? And then I asked her, well, why is this happening? Why is this baby not coming? Like, what am I supposed to do? And she said, well, there is no right answer. If a baby comes this way or that way, it doesn't matter. But November 5th is a very powerful day. And that was the next day, just saying in the whatever star signs, I don't know exactly. And she said, your daughter did this because you guys aren't ready and she wanted attention. And it kind of makes sense because there would be like no other explanation for why this placenta was coming off all of a sudden. And I believed that, and it made me drop in, and I could really see this, what I talked about earlier, this unworthiness that I just didn't think. Like, I thought, okay, of course it has to go bad for me again. Of course I'm going to lose the baby. Like, of course there's something wrong with me, like that pattern. And it was such a great chance to let that wash through. I don't know how I knew it. I just knew that. And also, yeah, I had read in Ina May's book, Spiritual Midwifery, which is this amazing book, all these beautiful birth stories. And they always ended well when women were just with their husband alone, I don't know, being intimate, being relaxed, trusting their knowing. And all the other stories and lovemaking, I read about that there, that can help. And then all the other stories from friends and so many people that are going through induction and then C-section and then terrible recovery from that. And then the effect of the drugs and it kind of like induction was just so much more scary for me than just, okay, let's see what happens naturally. Like, what's the baby gonna do? What's the body gonna do? So for me, it just totally made sense. So yeah, and then I thought, well, what's the harm in trying this out? Like, what's so bad about making love in the private bathroom? And not that it was fun, but I thought, well, why not? So to me, it just was so logical. I don't know. And I can understand the doctors too and how they have their protocol and they're just trying to do their best. But they're also on the clock, right? And they're like, okay, it's 7 o'clock in the morning. She was just going to try to sign me off to induction. So she was basically done with her job. So you can also see how that makes sense to them. So, and yeah, it just made sense to me.
Did you feel empowered of making these decisions at the hospital? Because I ask you because I also had a home birth, and I think that was one of the most empowering moments of my life. And I almost had to go to the hospital too because I'd been in labor for 2 days and it was just too long. So I love hearing these stories, even though you had to go to the hospital to get assistance, because it was out of the midwife's hands. But did you feel empowered? Like how did that experience leave you, of going through all of?
Yeah, it totally left me empowered. Like I felt like victorious really for like about 3 weeks. And then I kind of crashed. And then I kind of spoke with one of the doulas about it. And she really held space for me. And I was kind of shaking out. So I was telling the story. And she's like, you quite went through something like that. And there were like other little parts to it where the doctor just put the hand in and just kind of did a membrane sweep without even getting my consent. And I kind of stuff like that. And he's like, yeah, some women call that kind of rape, or there's some other term for it. Like, and it was like good to see also the gravity of the situation and how scary it was and what I went through. And then I kind of dropped and I had to like also work through the trauma of that. But in the end, I feel it was like it like, and then I also was like, well, I could have just had the home birth, right? Like if I would have made it a difference, right? I would have been relaxed, baby would have come, I would have been stressed out, I would have been, so I kind of doubted it a little bit and I was like, oh, well, that sucks. But then I could see, no, this story really helped me. This experience was for me. Like I couldn't have grown in it this way otherwise. If I would have just had this nice home birth where everything went how I wanted it. And with the second baby, I did have a home birth at my friend's place, who's this amazing intuitive healer. And, like I had that too, but I wouldn't say it was better. Like it wasn't actually. Like now, because I had both, I can really say that. And I'm really grateful for that experience.
And the way it happened, because I think everything happens the way it has to happen, right? Of just how you do it. And what do you want to pass down to your daughters now that you're breaking these patterns of, the good girl syndrome and just speaking up for yourself? Like what do you want to, what are you wanting to pass down? What ages are your daughters, by the way, Christiane?
6 and 3.5.
Yes, see, they're still young. What's the legacy that you want to leave for them?
Best I can wish for is I think that they can be themselves. That like, and I think the best I can do as a mother to not crush them because they're already so wild and free and amazing and confident. Like they're different than how I was as a little girl, and they're just so amazing on its own. I know that, but also I think just how we have been as parents by just not crushing this and over mothering and thinking we know better, but believing in their own wisdom and that they can trust their wisdom. I think that's the best I can really do as a mother, and I hope that they always find that.
What a beautiful gift to give them too. Speaking of mothers, what about that part that you were saying that you had a conversation with your mom years later of what had happened and feeling, that she didn't listen to you? How did that, because you said that it was a beautiful conversation. So obviously you must have gotten some type of closure. How did that go down? What are you grateful for from that conversation?
Yeah, interesting you're asking that. It went down in an interesting way where I was like, okay, well, she won't get it. It's fine. Like it's not her fault. And I just won't like address it. Like I talked about it once before and I cried and I said, this is how this affected me. And you could have said this instead. But it didn't really. She was kind of defensive a little bit. And then once I knew to speak about it like publicly, like not to name him or anything, but just for my sake, for the sake of my daughter, for the sake of other women. And I spoke on podcasts about it. I wrote social media posts and blogs about that kind of a thing. But I didn't want my mother to see it, so I blocked her on Facebook and Instagram. I was like, well, I don't want to like disturb her, right? But I know I still need to talk about it. And for some reason, like on some channel, and she's like rarely on social media and really doesn't know well how to use it. And but somehow she saw it, and it
Of
was an
course.
yeah, and it was an
That's like life, right? You're trying to avoid it, and it's like, no, that's how it happened.
like now I'm trying not to talk to you, right? I'm like, okay, I'll deal with it. It's fine. So she saw it, and then I saw she saw it somehow, and I was still going to delete it. So it's in English anyway. She might not understand it all, but then Facebook translates automatically to German, and she took a screenshot of it. So then she called me that day, and I was like, oh my God, I know what this call is about because I could see she saw it, and I was like, shaking, just like it's, you know, when you're in trauma and then you're releasing the trauma, you're just, your body's just shaking. I was shaking. I was calm, but also shaking during this whole conversation. I went into my office here, and then she really was like, and maybe it was different because I wasn't like, you did this to me and I have to tell you something. But she wanted to know. And she's like, what are you talking about? And I didn't talk exactly about, I talked something more like general. She's like, what do you mean by this? And what do you mean by that? And she really wanted to know in this English, or what does this mean? It's translated. And then, so I feel there's something that happened, but you're not like quite ready to, or not opening up right now. And just, but left it open for me. She actually spoke about it in a way she never was able to be like this. And I was like, whoa, this is just magical. And I shared with her the whole thing. I said, I don't know how much you remember of this, but, and I talked to you once about it in my life. And then she owned up. She was like, yeah, I guess so many years ago, something like I couldn't quite see it, or I couldn't quite understand it. Or I was, and she, it was like so understanding. And I didn't even need her to say, I'm so sorry, but I just needed her to listen. And I just spoke it as it was. That's how it happened. And she was like very calm. Okay. And it was just the best conversation ever. And then the other magical part is that I was just starting to have like high ticket clients, and not just stick to one-on-one nutrition sessions, but actually doing like several month mentorships on all these topics, and how that deeper power in women is related to also relationship and business and motherhood. And then I had someone fill out a call with me, and I just, in the background, I just read the intake form, like ready 10 out of 10, what drew you to my offer, and they're like, you're magic. And it was like the perfect client, and the perfect, just like ready to invest. And I knew it had something to do with us resolving this, where I was holding myself back, like just the timing of everything. Like it was just the craziest thing. So I'm very grateful for that.
That is great. So, did you feel closure both with your mom as well as with this family member that had the abuse?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so great. If only more of us could speak in that way, with those that didn't understand us back whenever the situation or the incident happened. So I commend you for that, Christiane, for being able to do it without pointing fingers, but more with just like, I need to get this off my chest, and I need to speak it, and I need to speak my truth, and allowing them to just contribute or to listen or to on their part, because that takes a lot. That definitely takes a lot of courage to be able to do what you did with both of them.
Yeah, and it was really for the sake of, like, for the relationship, like it was like I didn't want to give up with the relationship. And in my family, the pattern is so normal to just, oh, we just don't talk to each other
And
for years, or we just don't see each other. Like, I'm done with this person. And I just didn't want to give up on it. And I could have left it as, okay, well, we can still talk, but it's just gonna only go to this depth of the conversation. It's fine. But that I actually had that opportunity, like that's just so, so amazing. And yeah, I really
yeah,
recommend everyone to not stop where they think they
that's
should stop.
that is fabulous. Where can people find you and be part of your community and your world?
Yeah, so my website is dragonessrising.com. And I welcome everyone to join the newsletter with lots of amazing free resources, and to stay in touch and to join our community and be connected this way. And then from there, there's social media links as well.
Thank you so much. I want to ask you one last question that I ask all my guests, which is, what could our listeners do to live a life with more courage?
Well, I believe that the most courageous thing is actually to be vulnerable and real. So to be who they really are, to be vulnerable in that and not shape ourselves differently for the sake of other people, to not give up just because they're judged as maybe crazy, because you know what, someone's always going to judge you. Like, you just can't do it right. Even when I was still trying to be the good girl and make it right for everyone, it's impossible. It's not even a real thing. And also because you will feel it, right? You're not going to be all said and done and like, oh, I'm courageous now, I don't doubt myself anymore, and now I'm not afraid anymore. Like, just feel it and do it anyways. And then the feeling the experience will change and will follow you. But at first it's a little bit like walking through a desert and you have to pave the path, but the oasis will be behind you. The results will come, but don't wait for the results.
Thank you, Christiane. That was fabulous. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. This was so lovely to chat with you, Tanya.
Hi there. I have something really cool for you. I want to give you free access to my signature course called Manifesting Abundance, which typically sells for $997. You can check out all the details in the show notes, and all you have to do to gain access is leave me a review on Apple Podcasts, take a snapshot of it, and send it to help.thecouragetobe@gmail.com, and we'll get you set up with access to the course.